Hello, and welcome to Pillar Talk. I am your host, Rochelle Armstrong, and during each episode, we're going to have guests from different backgrounds, different professions, and just different experiences who will pick one of the 12 pillars in my book, Simply Complex, Leading Out of Authenticity. And they're going to just talk about how that pillar has shaped them and just really helping them in becoming the person they are today. So today, listeners, we have a remarkable guest, Mr. John Fraggetta. Now, John, before we do this whole introduction, one of the things I meant to do before the interview is get the correct enunciation of your last name. So as we welcome you on the podcast, will you just tell us your full name and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. It's pronounced, last name is pronounced Fraggetta. So it's like the
Fraggetta.
Volkswagen Jetta with the
Fraggetta.
FRA in the front. It's the pronunciation.
Thank
And I'm sure. And I am a supervisor. I've been a supervisor probably closing in on 10 years now. And I've currently working from home, like a lot of us are with the pandemic.
you. Yeah.
So having a lot of really all my team working from home, and even before pandemic my whole team was working from home, so a lot of different experiences and challenges and a lot of things that people have done differently I've been doing for a while. So I
I
have some different
love that.
experiences there.
So once the pandemic hit, and so for you, it wasn't a big change because everybody was working at home at the time.
Yeah, we had really, for my entire department, we had a few people who would go into the office here and there. So our only major change was, okay, don't go into the office at all.
Right,
Stay
right.
home and keep doing what we're doing. So
Got
while
it.
other departments were really scrambling and trying to get things all settled and making sure they had adequate connections at home and things like that, we just had a 2-sentence email, and that was
Love
our
it.
adjustment.
Makes
So
it nice, makes the transition smooth, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, there was really hardly any transition. So we
Yes.
could really still be able to support customers. So
I love that. Well, John, it's such an honor to have you on the podcast today. I don't take you being here for granted. I don't take you all coming on the podcast sharing your story for granted. So I really just want to honor you and your story, and I want to protect it. And as we talk about the pillar that you chose today, one of my personal favorites is love. Is that correct?
that's it. That's the one.
I love that. So, I get into it a little bit in the book. None of my guests are required to read the book to be on the podcast. I just give you the pillars to choose from. And so, largely because I want to hear your perspective, because I've already talked about it in the book. And for me, I really wanted to tie love into leadership because that's kind of a bad word sometimes in corporate America. Like we don't want to use fluffy words. Like we don't want to talk about the big L word. But as humans, we all desire love. We desire to be loved. And it really impacts how we show up and how those who report to us respond when they feel like we genuinely care about them and have their best interest at heart. And so, John, I'm going to kick off like I do with every other guest. It's just with the question: how has love impacted your life professionally and negatively?
So you have to have that in the workplace. As much as people, like you say, people don't want to talk about it, you have to have it. And it may not be the kind, there's different, the word love varies. It has a lot of different meanings. What it boils down to in the workplace really is respect, and that you care about people, and that you want to see them succeed, and you want what's best for them. And if you can really show that love and show that you want what's best for them, you want them to be able to really be able to feel that belonging and know that they feel okay. And if you can show that and have that to them, they're going to be better. They're going to bring their better selves to work. They're going to be more engaged. You're going to hit a lot of the metrics that you want to hit professionally because you're treating them right.
Yes. And it's interesting that you brought up the word metrics because that is a very common term used in any corporation, whether if you work in a factory, if you work in corporate America. no matter what business you're in, metrics are important. Let's be honest, it's all about the bottom line. And so we're not going to pretend that we're in business for fun. Now, you're fortunate if you get to do work that you're passionate about, but at the end of the day, if it's a for-profit company, like you're in business to make money. And so when you think about the different leadership styles and how you get results from people, how you get those metrics, what leadership style would you best associate with when it comes to you as a leader, as a supervisor?
Um, I kind of think of myself as the leader for the people.
Okay.
Sort of way to say it is that you have to explain. I'm sorry. I'm very 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 transparent, and I'm transparent to a fault.
Okay.
And so explain to people why the metrics are important, why they need to be met, and you can go up the line. These metrics are important because this is how we staff. This is how we staff because this is what we need. This is the objective. Here is the part you play. And so everyone needs to know that, and they need to understand the role that they're playing. Now, at the same time, you want to be loving. If you can help them get to a position to where they need to improve. And part of that is being direct and saying, look, if there's a problem, we're going to address it. It
Yes.
doesn't mean I'm mad at you. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It means there's an elephant in the room and we're going to discuss it. And if there's a problem with me, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. If it's coming from a place of love, it's all going to be good.
That's right. So we both know that love is an action word.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be easy for anyone to walk around and just tell people that they love them and they get the results that they're looking for. And so we're not going to do that. We know that in order for people to genuinely feel cared for, feel loved, it's something about your actions that's making them feel that way. So in the workplace, how do you show that you love your direct reports or the team that reports to you without actually saying the words?
Right. It's about how you're communicating with them. A lot of it's the tone and way you speak to them. It's about respect. You want to be able to talk to them respectfully and directly. And when like I said, when there is an issue, address it.
Yes.
And it's because you want the best for them. You want to see them succeed. You have to, sometimes being able to show love is giving that correction, right? And be able to say, okay, can't do this. You got to do this.
Yes.
If it's hard, let's work together to get there. So to show that, you just have to show it, and you have to feel it first. Because if you're faking it, they will know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it's something you said that really stood out to me that I respect is the honesty part. So love is not about fluff. When you love someone, whether if it's in the workplace, whether if it's in a platonic or romantic relationship, part of loving someone is being honest with them. So you said, if I want them to be their best self, then I have to be honest and be truthful. And so knowing that you've been a supervisor for 10 years now, you can't do that if you're not showing up in your authentic self and if you're not really being genuine. Now, I don't want to assume that everyone that's been in any type of leadership position for any length of time has those characteristics or show up genuinely. And so I'm a little more interested in your personal story as to why you're able to show up and genuinely show love to your team and you want the best for them. Was it really your upbringing? Was it the environment that you grew up in? Tell me a little more about you personally as to why you can show up and genuinely love the people that report to you.
And I think a lot of that is from my upbringing, and it's how I want to be treated. And so it's, for me, it's easiest for us. You talk about authenticity. I got to let the cat out of the room here.
Go right ahead.
So having that, that's the way I want to be treated as a leader. So it's easy and it's natural for me to treat others that way. And to reflect that. It's not always, some people don't need that. Everyone needs their own individual everyone needs a certain type of leader. And so it's difficult to be everything for everybody when it's different. But
Yes.
everyone needs to feel loved. Everyone needs to feel appreciated.
Universal,
So that's
right? Love
right,
is universal. Yes.
and
No,
the way it's shown for this person will be different for that person because they need it differently, right?
yes. So I hear that although you're fair, it's not always going to be equal. So because
Yeah,
people are different and they require different leadership styles, you got to be able to use supervisor discretion. Like you're not going to be able to just use a playbook and just lead everybody the same because that probably would seem disingenuous, right?
absolutely. If you're saying if you can't work from a script,
No.
because everyone's different, and so part of that is when you have new people come to your team or you're new coming into a team, you have to get to know the people.
So,
You
so
just
share
do,
with
and
us some ways that you get to know your people because part of the podcast, as we're sharing story, is to inspire hope and just to inspire people to be their best self. And so I know there's other leaders who are listening who would be able to benefit from you, your story, and some of the things that you do. So, what are some things that you do one on one or even collectively as a team to help get to know the people on your team better?
really it's about making those connections and
Okay.
talking to them. So I talk with my team really as often as I can. Um, and you should be have those monthly meetings, have weekly meetings, whatever you can afford, and just ask them directly, what do you need from me?
Okay.
What do you, if this situation arises, how would you like me to react? And it's okay to ask those questions, and if you need to, take little notes till you really get to remember them, until you know what that, and it's like if someone needs praise or if you want to praise someone, some people may like that individual pat on the back. Some
Mhm.
people may want you to throw them a party during a team
Right.
meeting. Everyone's different. And so just ask them, if you do something good, how do you want to be recognized?
I
Nothing wrong
like
with
it.
asking them.
How do you want to be recognized? So, do you find that you have high performers on your team because of your leadership style of starting with the heart or love first?
I would think so, yeah, for sure. Um, and a lot of it's up to them too, of course. If they don't have the training and they don't have the things they need, they're not going to be high performers. So it's not about just showing them love. You got to do the dirty work too.
Yeah,
You have to really get into their get them the things they need. They all got to have the basics. They
basic
need
needs.
trainings. They need, yeah, basic training, and they need things, or else it's not going to work out. And
Right.
so, but they need that continued support. Um, but there's that old saying: they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care,
So true.
and it's
So
true.
it is true. And when I think about you being a father of three, I'm wondering, do you think it comes easier for some people, like if they're parents or they have pets, like you just let your cat out? By the way, what's your cat's name?
That was Rosalina.
Rosalina was so cute. I love how she gave us a shout out before she left the
Yeah,
room. Meow, right? And so I don't know. Like I hear other leaders or just people that I talk to who want to kind of steer away or move away from like that L word or servant leadership. They look at it as a negative and kind of that top down leadership. You should just do as I say or do as you're told. And so for you, is it anything like in your life personally that you feel like allows you to love a little bit easier maybe than others?
I mean, having that from my parents is growing up. It's more natural to me,
Okay.
and having that relationship I do with my children, with my pets,
Mhm.
being able to show that love, it's more natural for me. So the people who kind of oppose that servant leadership, you're really missing out.
I would
So it's
agree.
worth a shot.
Okay, so when you say it's worth a shot, can it be taught? Can you teach people to lead out of love from a place of love if it doesn't come natural for them?
Absolutely. It's just you can learn to do anything, even if it's not natural to you.
Yes.
Um, So it may not be learned, it may not be natural, but you can still do it, you know? But you want to, and so it would really start, like I said before, making that connection with individuals. If you have that connection and you can become, being a manager and being a leader and being a friend are all different things, but there's a little bit of elements of each one of them, you
There
know? I have people on my team, they'll text me on the weekends and send me a picture of their family, and it's the same going back and forth. So
so
there's
sweet.
still that element in there as well, you have
Do
to
you
show
ever
you
run
care
across,
about them.
well, and excuse me, do you ever run across people who is hard to love? Not just on your
Sure.
team, but just help us. Like maybe selfishly, I'm wanting some of these tips as well. So how do you love the unlovable? Like that's for a lack of better word.
Right. No, it's difficult, and that's a challenge I face with as well, for sure. Um, but you have to really get to the point, even when they're unlovable, there's something in there. You have to be curious, and be curious why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And something may have happened in their life. There was one person, and it wasn't, um, and this wasn't someone at work. This was something separate. They just were a very difficult person to deal with, and I found out about a tragedy that they had suffered in their life, and they had changed dramatically after that. And so it made sense now. And so, when you make those connections, and it's sort of like if a dog is hurt, they hurt their leg, and you're trying to help them, and they bite you. You
Yes.
understand why they bit you,
Mm,
right? They weren't biting you to be mean. They were biting you because they were hurt. So
mm,
when people are hurting, they're going to react.
yes.
And
Yes.
conversely, when you show them love, they're going to react.
So you said another word that I think is important is understanding. So how often do we just slow down to understand behaviors, to understand why people show up the way they do? So much in the world, if we would just slow down and try to understand before forming opinions, before judging and making assumptions. I know you're busy. I used to be a supervisor, right? So I know the load that you carry between meeting after meeting. You have to manage up, you have to support your direct reports. John, how do
Mhm.
you slow down to try to understand not just the people on your team, but even your peers and your leadership? How do you do that?
Right. And that's, um, it's part of um, I apologize.
No, take your time.
So it's just, you have to take the time to do it.
Hmm.
And it may be, some emails may have to pile up. Sometimes you're a couple minutes late to a meeting.
Yes.
Again, as you give understanding, as you do this with other people, they'll understand you. I have a core team of supervisors that I work with and my manager. And when we have a meeting and it's just the few of us, if one of us is 5, 10 minutes late, we kind of expect it sometimes, right? Because
Exactly. Yes.
sometimes things come up, and it's knowing you see that email pop up, and from the subject line, from the first few sentences, if it's something that you're needed now, or if it's something, oh, I have a little bit of time later, I can get to that. So it's about setting those priorities as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing time management.
Absolutely.
So time management is really important as a leader as well, because some things are important and then there's things that are urgent. And if you
Right.
have good time management skills, you will manage your time well, where you don't have as many fires to put out, where you can just
Yeah.
manage effectively. So when something does urgent arise, you don't have all these little fires. You can just address that issue so that you're making time for the people who matter most.
Right. And delegation comes into that too. Sometimes, I'll get a question from someone and I just answered that same question for someone else last week. And so you have that forward button you can hit
Yes.
on the email and say, hey,
Yes.
do you mind going over this with somebody for me, with this so and so for me? And
Mhm.
that's building trust with them, because they say, oh, this John trusts me. They
Yeah.
think I can do this too. They have faith in me. And so that inspires good feelings as well.
I like that. And I like that you said it inspires good feelings because we do like to be trusted. And I think a sign of love is showing someone that you trust them. It's almost the biggest compliment you can give someone is just trust them to get it done. And so trust isn't always easy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So when I think about building trust with people, and again thinking about it being actions, just like with love is actions. It's not just saying I trust you. It's about allowing people the capacity to fail.
Oh,
So I want to talk about that for a minute. I'm a mother of three. I have two older kids. I got one younger, what I call her my later in life child. And what I would tell you is I'm so grateful for the older two. And I always tell her she should be too, because they went through trial and error so that she doesn't have to. So I learned a lot from what I went through with them
yeah.
so that she doesn't have to go through a lot of those same things. So I'm like, you're standing on their shoulders. I'm sharing that to say that when they were growing up, I was such a perfectionist. I wanted the house in a certain order. I was never diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, but I was pretty OCD. And so a lot of times I only trusted myself to do
Yeah.
things right. And I was wore out and exhausted most of the time because I wasn't delegating. I didn't trust anyone else to do it the way that I would do it. But then over the years, I had to realize that if I didn't want to be as tired and worn out and wanted to actually have downtime after work to enjoy spending time with them, I had to let them fail in my
Yeah.
words, right? Because they're not really failing if they don't wash the dishes like I do or vacuum like I do. But I had to be okay with them failing or making mistakes in order for us to build that trust and them to know like she believes in me to get it done, not like her, but like me. Let's talk about that when it comes to work. Because when I say failure or I say mistakes, sometimes it doesn't feel like we can do that at work. So when you're trying to build trust, maybe like with a team lead or someone that you are given a little more responsibility to, what does that look like in terms of delegation and building trust with that person?
The first thing you have to understand is they may not do it exactly the same way you do it, and it can be okay. So it may not, you may look at it as a failure, but it may not be a failure. They may still
Right,
get everything done, but it may not look like what you expect at the end. Sort of like, cleaning their room, you
right.
know, and if it's something they've never done before, you can show them how to do it, but they're doing their best,
Yeah,
so you can assume that. And it's the same way, you have your young child, 4 or 5 year old, you tell them to go clean their room. I know my 10-year-old, he'll go clean his room and he thinks he's done. I go in there and I see about 30 things that aren't right, right?
right.
But he looks at his room and he's proud of himself.
Yeah,
Do you want to crush that feeling and say, okay, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong? No,
no,
because I love him.
that's,
I want him to feel good about himself. See, I brought it back
yeah.
there. Good stuff, huh?
Yes, yes. We're always going to tie it back in. I trust you for that, John. And so we are talking a lot about the positives of love and how it's impacted your life. As just staying true to the topic on the podcast is we don't just share the positive, we share the negative. Why? Is because we learn from it. And I want listeners to hear how you can take a negative and turn it into a positive. That inspires hope. And so, are there any examples in your personal or professional life that you've seen love being used negatively or in an unhealthy
Hmm. None really come to mind, but the thing with love is when you show it, if it's not returned, it can be difficult, professionally or personally, of course.
way?
And so maybe you're passionate about a subject, maybe and you're hoping your team will have that same passion about it, and clearly they don't at times,
Right.
right? And that's okay because maybe they're passionate about something, and I look at it and I'm just like, whatever. But so we have to have that understanding of one another, and so it's when you're putting yourself out there, you can get hurt a little,
You can.
you know.
And we didn't even say it. It was unspoken that when you love, you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so we know a lot of people are guarded and it's not easy to let people in. As you stated earlier, some people have experienced trauma or heartbreak or things within their life that has them kind of guarded and not letting
Yeah.
people in. And so let me tell you this, part of the purpose of the book was not just for self-help. Like that's one purpose. Like someone could read it and they may see themselves in some of the stories or examples, but in part it was for leaders who may have people who have similar experiences. So in other words, maybe they can't relate to anything I talked about in the book. The stories are far-fetched, they're bizarre, they're unheard of, and they just can't relate. Well, I still challenge people to read the book because maybe you manage or lead people who's been through those type of things. And so what advice would you give someone who maybe haven't necessarily experienced any hardship or heartbreak, and they kind of have that very matter of fact leadership, and you should just get it done, and they don't look at the gray that is sometimes deeper than what's on the surface? What advice would you give someone leading like that?
That's when you have to really look at the quality of empathy,
Mm,
because maybe you haven't experienced it, so you may not fully understand it. But if you're trying to take their pain and put it in yourself and try to feel it and, really think about it, put yourself in their shoes,
yeah.
and maybe you still don't fully understand it,
No.
but it's apparently affecting them, right? So you
Yes.
have to give them some understanding, and
Yeah.
you have to think about how it impacts them, how things may things that we don't think about, it
Yeah.
impacts them. You know, we adopted a dog before COVID, and the dog was previously abused. Okay, so this dog's a nervous wreck all the time over nothing.
Mm,
You know, you'd make, if I picked up a piece of paper and did that, she'd get up and walk out of the room.
so sad.
Okay, for you and I, me doing this is nothing. For her, it's something.
Yes.
It triggers something that gets her to get up and walk away.
So true.
So we may not understand it, we may not get it, but it doesn't mean it's not real.
Oh, that's so good. Yes. And so as we kind of wrap up, and I say that because as I stated earlier, like the conversation can just go in any direction. Out of all the pillars, there's 12, and I sent all 12 to you. What made you pick the pillar love to focus on today?
And sort of what you said on at the outset, people don't want to talk about it. It's the word in the room in corporate America. People don't want to acknowledge it's part of it, but it is.
Yes,
And you hear people, they throw around the term work family. Oh, it's my work family. Well, why do you say that term? Because there's love there,
that's right.
right? And so, it's there. It's part of life, whether
Yes,
professionally, non-professionally, personally. It's part of life. So embrace it because
yeah.
it's there.
So are you comfortable using the term love in communications at work, or do you try to kind of stay away from it because it has a negative connotation in the workplace?
No, I'm fine using that word. And some people aren't, and that's okay. Like we said, everyone has different experiences, and it doesn't mean I go around telling everyone I love them every day, but
Right.
there's other leaders in my area who do.
Hmm.
you know at the end of every call, it's like, hey, I love you guys. And she's not meaning it as any sort of inappropriate way, and it's because she feels it.
Yes.
you
Well,
know
and you may be familiar with this. One of the courses I used to facilitate is called Real Colors.
Mhm.
And there's a certain personality type that is more of that loving and relational. And what I would tell you is whenever I would take teams through that course, especially if they were more like on the actuary side or IT side, it was like anybody who fell under that personality type was essentially shamed, like in front of everybody for being wired up that way. And of course, as a facilitator, it was part of my role to facilitate that discussion, make sure it was a safe space, make sure that nobody was judging one another. But can you see, and I think through our discussion, you can kind of see why some people hide maybe the softer sides of them or the more loving sides of them. And so, keeping that in mind, how do you think that impacts the workplace when people who are naturally very kind and genuinely loving have to or feel the need to kind of suppress that?
Yeah, it's if you feel out of place, and it can take away that feeling of belonging that you have,
Mm,
you know. And so I get it. Those in those areas that you talked about, IT, and those are statistical. Those are We're not looking at feelings. We're looking at facts.
yes.
You know, but when you're dealing, because they're working with the computers, and we're all on computers, but they're working, with computers and math, and that's part of all of our jobs. But there's the
Mhm.
human element too.
Yes.
Humans aren't just statistics. And
Right.
so if you're a people leader, you really should have some element of that for sure. Whether you're regardless of what department you're in or what industry you're in. If you're a people leader,
Yeah.
people have emotions. That's a fact.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of times, and I talk about this in the book as well, is people are promoted for their skill set
Mhm.
or are being really good at the job itself. But then what happens when they become a leader because they don't have those people skills, they don't have the emotional intelligence, they don't have the empathy. Either they don't stay in the role long or their people suffer.
Yeah.
John, being a leader for 10 years, let's talk about like how we can look at the hiring process when it comes to internal, meaning again, you're kind of promoting within, you're looking at people who's really good at either processing those claims, meeting those metrics, being able to do the job well, but maybe as a leader, you notice that they're not approachable or they don't speak when they come in. Like, how can we look at that differently? Not saying that you don't promote those people, but should we be looking at the emotional intelligence as much as a person's IQ?
Absolutely, if not more so. And you definitely don't want to exclude those people from the hiring selection, because in case in point, a fellow supervisor, one of the knocks on him when people were talking about it, they're like, well, he just sits on the computer with his headphones on. He's not up talking to people. It's like, well, that's not his job to be up talking to people.
Right, right.
Now that he's a people leader, he's up talking to people and he's great. You
Good
know,
point.
and so, but there is that aspect to it. And you and I have both seen leaders like that. As far as having that technical ability, they're fantastic and they're brilliant people. But you put them on a team and they just want the work done, like you said, and they're just like, get it done. I don't care about your problem. I don't care if your kids are sick. I
Yeah,
don't care if you have this. Just get the work done.
yes.
It doesn't work out. It
Are
doesn't
they
work out.
coachable? Can someone be coached if they
Absolutely.
okay,
Like I said, you can learn anything. You can learn
right.
anything. But if if you hire someone and you don't coach them and get them up to where they need to have that love and show that to people, and they don't
Mhm.
realize that's important, they're not going to change.
Right.
You still have to have those open, honest discussions with them and say, this is important. It may not come naturally, but you can learn
Yes.
it. And so having that, and it's definitely a big part of the job of being a people leader, is you have to care about the people and you have to take care of the people, not only from a technical side but from an emotional side. some
Absolutely. Because
Sometimes I'll go to have
go ahead.
I'll have one-on-ones with people, and they'll have stuff going on and they're talking about their stuff going on. We don't even get to their metrics, we don't get to those things, and that's okay. We can do that later.
Absolutely.
And just knowing and accepting that that's okay is a big deal.
Yes. Yes. So let me ask you this. If there was one thing, and you can take some time to think about it. If there was one thing or one piece of advice that you would give a leader who says, I come to work to do my job. I don't have time for the fluff. I'm not a babysitter. I'm not nurturing anyone. I don't want to talk about that love stuff. What advice or encouragement would you give them in regards to love and leadership?
That their job will be easier,
Mm,
and that if they love and trust and can build their team up, because that's how you want your team to be their best. That's what they need a lot of times. And every individual is different. Some are going to need more love than others. But you, they're only going to benefit from having that side. And it doesn't mean they have to be that leader that runs around and is giggly and happy and is,
that's
wanting
right.
to give everyone a hug. That's okay. You don't have to have
Right.
that.
No.
But you gotta have some side of you that just is, even if it's just a little compassionate, it goes a long way.
Well, and
Because the
that's a
thing,
good point. Well, because what I'm thinking about my youngest daughter, and she is very type A. She's not really comfortable with emotions, but she's good at showing that she cares. But it looks very different than my middle daughter, who likes to hug, who wants to express love. And so, again, even in our personal lives, we see the difference in how people love and how they like to be loved. And so, is it important for you as you're talking to your team and you're asking them what do they need of you? Is it important for you to share with them how you're wired up and what you need as a leader?
yeah, definitely. You definitely want to have that open communication. And that was honestly when I would get, used to be in the area where we get people, they come out of training and they come to me. That was my
Mm,
role for a while. And I'd have that open communication and you set the very clear expectations. I'd have a meeting with them their first day, on the floor, and I'd say, okay, this is what I want. I want A, B, C.
mhm.
And I said, anything else? And that I'm a lot more forgiving if I get those three things from you.
That's
And so you
good.
have that conversation with them and know what your clear expectations are. And then a lot of that fluffy babysitting stuff doesn't have to happen.
That's right.
I don't have to babysit my team. I know they're working. I know they're getting done. I can look at the metrics and see that they're getting everything done.
That's right. Yes.
And it's because I built that trust with them. They don't need me looking over their shoulder, making their life miserable. Would you want
No,
that?
absolutely not. No, don't like micromanagement. Love
No.
trust.
Right.
Well, I tell you, John, it's definitely been a treat talking to you. In some ways, as I'm doing these interviews, I connect with each guest differently for different reasons. And so I can definitely relate to you in my former years of being a supervisor. And so a lot of the tips and tools that you
Hmm.
use, I remember incorporating those as well. And I am more of that relational type leader that likes to trust and not micromanage and want people to be their best. And if I'm just being completely transparent, there were times that I felt like I needed to suppress a little more of the loving side of me to be taken seriously,
Yeah.
to be respected, because there's a misconception when someone is nice or they're showing that they genuinely care that they're weak or they're a
Hmm.
pushover. And so over the years, I see where I made a lot of mistakes and I had room for improvement. But at the end of the day, very similar to you, I feel very, very fortunate that some of my former direct reports will still reach out and just check in and say, hey, how are things going? Or, happy birthday, or whatever the well wishes may be. So I would like to
Hmm.
think that me leading from a place of love made a difference.
It apparently did. If you still have people from years ago reaching out to you, it
Yes,
definitely
yes.
did.
I really, really appreciate that. So, John, any closing remarks? Anything you want to share before we wrap up today?
Well, no, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and letting me share some of my experience. And I hope this benefits people. And just don't be afraid to show your love to your team. They need it and you need it too. It's only going to help you.
Nicely stated. Oh, yes, yes. And I love that you're not afraid to say the L word. Yes, it's needed. And when it's reciprocated, I think it really makes a harmonious team, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Nice. Well,
Absolutely.
John, you keep leading out of authenticity. You keep leading from a place of love. And I just wish you and your team the very best. Listeners, I want to thank you for joining in today. And hopefully, you will go out and you will rate and review the podcast so that we can really grow in the podcast world where there are authentic people and real stories. Rochelle Armstrong, leading authentically.